4th Avenue to Techwood Drive, O'Leary to Key. It's WreckTalk!
What is going on, everyone, and welcome to WreckTalk. Hope you're having a great day or night at the time I'm recording this. And I know what you're thinking. The stresses of life, they are what they are. But at least I've got my home team, football. And in the offseason, as long as anything catastrophic doesn't happen, the offseason's great. We got everything to look forward to. We're 0-0. We're going undefeated next year. And then,
oh, shit. Here we go again.
the news breaks that Tyler Santucci evidently is going to the Ravens to be their linebackers coach. Now, this is about as bad as losing Buster Faulkner for Georgia Tech. Now, and look, there could be teams calling for him. They have in the past, who knows? But as of now, Buster Faulkner, not worried about him. And there were rumblings about teams in the college ranks wanting to hire Tyler Santucci. Evidently, he's gotten some offers to go coach in the NFL before. But this is bad. Tyler Santucci did everything that could be expected, all the expectations we had preseason, and really then some. As a coordinator at Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's defense was absolutely awful, especially in stopping the run last year. Georgia Tech's defense was so bad, we're going to talk about it, that we fired not one, but two defensive coordinators. You know how bad your defense has to be to fire two defensive coordinators in the same year? Just look at Georgia Tech last year. Now, what does this tell me? And let me go ahead and quail what some people are saying. There's always a group, and it's not just Georgia Tech, of any fan base, anytime something like this happens. Well, he was no good anyways, didn't need him, didn't want him. We're going to be totally fine, nothing to see here. And if you're in that camp, you're not a serious person. I'm not talking to you. Comment whatever you're going to comment. This is a massive loss. This is a massive loss, and we're going to learn a lot about how far Georgia Tech football has come, depending on what happens now to the time we hire. How long does it take to hire? Who do we hire? How good is that hire? How exciting is that hire? J-Bat, signed him to this extension, basically, kept him from going to South Carolina. This is where your AD makes his money, all right? By giving the resources, and let's just call it what it is, financially, to your head coach to go make a hire to put you in a position to be successful on the defensive side of the ball for this coming up season. What does this tell me, though, about Santucci? One, it tells me he probably wanted to go to the NFL, but two, how difficult college football is. We've talked about it before. This was something I brought up with being critical of the Bill Belichick hire. I know Bill Belichick has talked to people who've coached college football. I don't think he has any idea what he signed up for. College football, coaching in college football might be one of the most difficult, time-consuming, high-stress jobs you can possibly have. It's 24/7, 365, just on the recruiting side. That's just on the recruiting side, right? So I understand, Santucci probably going to make similar money. I don't know if he will take a pay cut to be the linebackers. I don't know what the pay structure for NFL coaches look like. But if he kind of wanted to go to the NFL side anyways, he's going to have a massive, load taken off his back as far as what he's doing in the day-to-day and year-round. But it is a huge loss. So I thought we'd kind of step back for a second before we look at maybe candidates, and that's not something I'm an expert on, but what does the total turnover on staff for Brent Key look like? If we go back to 2022, throw out the interim year, right? You're not hiring and firing in your interim year, but you're going to set your staff for year one under Key, which would have been 2022. He retains three coaches that I can remember. Andrew Thacker, he retains as his DC. Marco Coleman wasn't a retention, but we brought him. He left for a year after Collins and came back, so that's almost like a retention, kind of. Travaris Tillman as defensive backs coach, and who else? Chris Winkie would be in there. We kept Chris Winkie. Am I missing anyone in that? Jason Seymour. That's a name that's going to come up too. If you're looking on possible candidates, if you looked at the Sports Illustrated article, I believe he's on there. Those were everyone on the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, we bring in, let's see here, Kevin Scherer on the defensive side of the ball. We talked about Marco Coleman. Bring in Buster Faulkner, absolutely, probably one of the most home run hires Georgia Tech has ever made. Jeep Wade, he doesn't get talked about a lot because he's a position coach, but you look at the Georgia Tech offensive line and where they've come from, being under Jeff Collins, one of the worst offensive lines in the country, to what they are now, a legitimate, in conversations of top 10 now perennially offensive lines in the country. Absolutely fantastic job by Jeep Wade. We haven't really talked about him being poached, but he could be a candidate for that. Talked about Chris Winkie. Josh Crawford, that was hired that year as wide receiver coach. Norval McKenzie as the running backs coach. Now, what happened with that? We know Andrew Thacker was fired. Not a good split. I remember seeing Brent Key all but assault the man at the Bowling Green game. Marco Coleman fired. Travaris Tillman fired. Jason Seymour, the only one on that staff that was not fired on the first round of hires and retentions for Brent Key. So, this might be the mark of just a guy who's a first-year head coach, but everyone but Jason Seymour, like Kevin Scherer, fired, promoted to was co-defensive coordinator, promoted to defensive coordinator, and then fired. Jason Seymour hired by Marshall. On the offensive side of the ball, and this is surprising to me, I kind of thought we had more turnover on that side of the ball, but only Josh Crawford, who was hired by University of Georgia, obviously for his recruiting acumen as their running backs coach. We end up bringing in Trent McKnight. Last year, obviously, we bring in Tyler Santucci. He's the topic of the video. Another equally really home run hire is Buster Faulkner. Unfortunately, we weren't able to retain him. Then we bring in Ricky Brumfield as special teams coordinator and cornerbacks coach.
My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined.
Awful hire. Guy that can recruit, but almost came this close, a rat's pube hair, from taking us back to Jeff Collins type special teams. Our special teams this year were horrific under him. It's inexcusable. And what's even worse is he wasn't even fired for that. He might have been. He was hired to a massive extension. Who knows what he did behind the scenes? He ends up stepping down, I'm stepping down, whatever. We all know what that's about. He was ostensibly fired, and he gave Georgia Tech, this is what's so dumb, basically a get-out-of-jail-free card where we don't have to pay his buyout. Now, a team like Syracuse, Fran Brown, who whines, bitches, complains, moans about people playing tubas and stuff while his kickers are practicing kicking, perfect fit for Syracuse, which is where he's going to end up going, but really ended up being an absolutely awful hire for Brent Key. Bring in Jess Simpson. I think that was an absolute home run hire. Corey Peoples and Kyle Pope at the defensive backs, and then like linebackers, defensive end. Don't have much to say about them, but they're still on staff. And then obviously we bring Trent McKnight on. Now, I'll mention it here. I haven't got to make a video on this yet, but we do bring in 4 new people on the staff. This was announced before, Santucci was announced as leaving and going to the Ravens. We bring in Kobe Jones from Alabama. He was assistant defensive backs coach under Kalen DeBoer, has IMG Academy ties, a bunch of Alabama ties. He'll be coaching cornerbacks. Obviously, with Ricky Brumfield leaving, we had a vacancy there. Assistant offensive line coach, very interesting hire for Georgia Tech. Mike Polley was actually the offensive line coach for Keelan Rutledge at Middle Tennessee State. Has a ton of experience in coaching, just further fortifies and positions Georgia Tech to be an absolutely dominant offensive line group moving into the future. And then I can't believe I haven't made a video on this yet. Senior offensive assistant, Brian Bohannon. We've talked about it on the channel, a guy that got absolutely screwed by Kennesaw State I've taken their jersey down now, but basically fired for not being Liberty with a 50th the resources that a school like Liberty has. Going to be very interesting to see what he does and what wrinkles you might see in this offense between him and Buster Faulkner, a guy that definitely knows his stuff on offense. Excited to see Brian Bohannon, and a guy that a lot of Tech people are going to be excited to come to be coming back. A guy that I don't really know anything about, quality control assistant for the offensive line, Emil Ekiyor Jr. I think I'm pronouncing that right. It's an interesting hire because he played for Key. I believe he won a national title with Key at Alabama. But I don't even see that he has any coach. I think he might have some grad assistant experience on his record. But a guy that knows Key well, a guy that's coached under Key, that's going to come in what appears to be on an off-the-field role. Something else to mention, I think they've changed the rules for exactly how many on-field, off-field, on-field coaches you can have. I think you can have like an infinite number, or how many you want of off-the-field roles. That might have changed in this. I probably should have researched that before the video. Excuse me. But that's not the topic of the video. So that's kind of the staff shakeup. Let's talk about some candidates. Now, this isn't like a definitive list of possible candidates for me. Really, what the point of this is what type of candidates that we're looking for. Like, we're behind the 8 ball here. We're very late in the cycle for going out and hiring a coordinator level position. Ohio State, obviously, looking like we're not in the same pond as a team like that. We're not competing to hire the same candidates as a team like Ohio State, who just won a national title. For Georgia Tech, I think it's going to come down to one of 3 camps. One, obviously, hiring a guy that's already on staff, promoting from within. I'm trying to think if I can remember Tech ever doing that, to be honest. That wasn't the case with Thacker. It was kind of the case with Scherer, even though they were both fired in the same year. Not something that I've known Tech to really do, and honestly not something I'm super excited about doing in this cycle, but you could hire from within. 2 up-and-coming group of 5 level type coordinator or position coach. That's been kind of the bread and butter, tried and true for what Tech has done. If you look at the DCs we've hired before Tyler Santucci, it's usually been some kind of up-and-comer guy that's in the group of 5 ranks. 3, I'm going to call a creative hire. A hire like Buster Faulkner, a guy that had coordinator level experience before, was an offensive assistant for Georgia, a guy that was probably being underutilized by them, and ends up coming to Georgia Tech and you know, being one of the best hires of all time for this school. I mean, I'm willing to say that. Buster Faulkner is one of the greatest hires probably of all time for Georgia Tech. It's just going to be a question of can we, hold on to him. So we've got up-and-coming group, promote from within, and then what I'm calling creative hire. So what I did is I looked at what are the top group of 5 defenses and what do those candidates look like. The top group of 5 defense, actually the 4th ranked defense in the country. Now, and you take these rankings with a grain of salt. I'm just looking at total defense. Obviously, group of 5 schools are not going to have the same strength of schedule as a Power 4 school. But I do want to look at, all right, who are the top group of 5 schools? What do those coordinators look like? The top 4th ranked nationally defense is Northern Illinois. A name that Georgia Tech fans are not fond of. Obviously, the Collins loss right there was at the opening game. It might have even been. I remember that vividly. But they also beat Notre Dame this year. Their DC was Nick Benedetto. I hope I'm saying that right. However, he was literally just like 2 weeks ago or something hired by Fresno State. So I believed if you wanted to hire him, you'd have to buy him out of his Fresno State contract and then you get him a new contract here. I think that's wholly unlikely you'd get a guy like him. The next highest ranked group of 5 defense is ranked 8th overall in total defense, Army. And this is going to be a name that should sound familiar. Army's DC right now is a guy named Nate Woody. Nate Woody has been the defensive coordinator at Georgia Tech before. He came from Appalachian State in 2018. He was the DC for Paul Johnson in his last year. Now, obviously, when Dumbass Collins took over, he wiped the entire staff and replaced them with probably verifiably worse coaches. Would have been interesting to see what Nate Woody would have done at Georgia Tech given some more time. I don't know if that bridge is burnt. He's a little bit older. Let's see. After he left Tech, he was an offensive assistant or a defensive assistant at Michigan. And then from 2020 until present, he's been in Army. It's an interesting name to mention. He's a guy from North Carolina, so he probably has some Southeast recruiting ties. If he's been at Army, he knows what it's like recruiting and coaching at a place that has high academic requirements. And I don't know why, just for some reason, it's not the name I'm the most excited about. Probably one to take a look at, though. Now, and this is just my list. This was before I looked at what anyone else was saying about candidates. This is kind of what I saw. Now, this was on the Sports Illustrated. I think that's Jackson Caudell's deal. The 9th ranked overall total defense, and the 3rd group of 5 school would be the Ohio Bobcats. Their DC and assistant head coach is a guy named John Hauser. Look, had a good defense, gave Syracuse fits, who had one of the best offenses in the country. The thing is, he doesn't have any big, Power 4 experience. I think he's been in the group of 5 ranks his whole time, which is not necessarily the worst thing. I would like to see a guy that has experience in a Power 4 program, at least at a position level coach. With one exception, he was the director of player personnel at Illinois. That's probably a name for Tech to look after. One that was interesting to me is Tulane's DC, a guy named Greg Gasparotto, 26th ranked, or actually 24th ranked total defense, a team that's, a step up from those, has a tougher strength of schedule, a guy that does have experience in Power 4 football at Louisville. He was the interim head coach and DC at Troy, so he's been a DC before as well, which is good. A step up for me, something that's important for me, and also was the co-DC at Army in 2020. So he ticks a lot of things in the right boxes for me. And I guess maybe I should just take a step back and say, what is, my Christmas list for this DC hire for Georgia Tech? First and foremost, and something that I can't really judge because I don't have an inside track on any of these guys, is they need to be able to recruit, and it would be nice if they could recruit, in particular, defensive linemen. So we've talked about this before. As Key assembles his staff, the first and foremost thing is going to be you've got to be able to recruit. If recruiting is something that you're not interested in, not good at, don't have a knack for, you're probably not going to be hired. Number 2 is I would like you to have been a DC before. And this really goes into Georgia Tech kind of making a statement with this hire. I would really like someone that has had at least co-DC level experience at a school before, and I would like them to have Power 4 level, at least position coach experience before. And then the last thing would be, I would like them to have some kind of experience at a tough academic school like a Wake, like a Duke, like an Army, something like that. You're not going to get all of those in the same sock probably with a candidate, but those would be the things that I would be looking at as we're moving forward. But Greg Gasparotto, Tulane DC, I think is an interesting candidate as well. A guy that kind of most excites me and I think would make the biggest statement for Georgia Tech, seeing as how they just made an ACC title appearance in their first year in the ACC, is Scott Simmons. That's the SMU DC, a guy that obviously is a current DC. It would be a huge statement if you could go hire SMU's DC. Now, they have a ton of money. They have deep pockets. They're going to be able to match and probably go above and beyond whatever Georgia Tech is able to do, and he's already in a fertile recruiting ground in the state of Texas. But it would be a great hire. SMU had a very stout defense, particularly in the run defense. He's been at Liberty before. He was part of getting Liberty ranked in his time at Liberty. Before that, he was at Memphis. That to me would be a home run hire. I just don't know how realistic it would be to go hire SMU's DC coming off of an ACC title run, title appearance, especially with the pockets that we know SMU has. Now, as far as creative hire, and I'm not saying hire this guy. Basically, what I did is I went and looked at, like, what are the top defenses in the SEC? So that would be like Ole Miss, Tennessee, Texas. I think it's Texas, Tennessee, Ole Miss in that order with the top 3 defenses in the SEC, and then it's South Carolina. I went and looked at those staffs. Like, so who is a defensive assistant or a defensive position coach that we could offer a promotion to? One interesting name that came up, and again, I'm not saying this is the guy you go after, but a guy like this is William, I think it's Ainge, spelled I-N-G-E. Been a DC before, has a ton of experience, especially in the SEC, co-defensive coordinator at Washington. And because he's at Tennessee, you know he can recruit, right? He's not going to be a position coach on Tennessee staff if he's not able to recruit and get in knockdown, drag out recruiting battles with other great recruiting schools that we know are in the SEC. So probably the hire I would like to, I mean, aside from Scott Simmons, is a creative hire like that. Can you promote a position coach or an analyst like we did with Buster Faulkner that can come in and make a big impact for you? Now, the ones we haven't talked about, obviously, if you're going to promote from within, Jess Simpson would be the obvious and really only choice, right? You've turned over your defensive staff now like 1.5 times in 2 years. Jess Simpson, a guy with a ton of experience. I'd have to look. I don't know that he's ever been a DC before. A guy that I wouldn't hate. Like if it came out tomorrow and Jess Simpson, it turned out, was the defensive coordinator for Georgia Tech, I wouldn't argue with that. I guess I'm just looking at Georgia Tech really taking a step up in the current landscape of college football. And I feel like we could do better. Again, that's why it's going to be important to look at what Georgia Tech does here, and that's going to kind of tell you where we are in some ways as a program as far as who we hire. The other one is Coach Boogie, Coach Seymour, currently at Marshall. I think he's doing fine over there. I just don't have much to say about him. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of Tech fans that would be excited about that. I just don't think it progresses our program where we need to go. I feel like it's a step back as far as defensive coordinator for us, and that's not taking anything away from Coach Seymour. Read my lips, I'm not bashing Coach Seymour at all, but I do feel like that's taking a step back. And as far as this hire, I want to at least go like for like with what we had with Santucci, or a slight upgrade, as difficult as that may be. So, kind of a long video today, a lot to go over. Big hit for Georgia Tech in losing their defensive coordinator. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. What do you think? Who would you like to see? Who's on your short list, top 5 of candidates? And I will say the one thing that I've seen kind of in messengers that I would agree with the most is, like, I do trust Coach Key. I do think Coach Key's going to make the best hire that's available to us. So I'm not worried at all about that. And also, before we get out of here, if you're not a member of AFTERSWARM, they broke this news, I believe. Or did they break this news? I don't know if they did break this news, actually. 95% of the time, they're breaking news like this. They have a forum now. I'll try and put that in the description of the video. They have a Substack where they, like I said, 95% of the time are breaking information for you. If you're a Tech fan, you're really going to want to sign up for that. They don't pay me a dime, by the way. They don't pay me a dime to do this. This is probably the only advertisement you're going to see on YouTube or anywhere where I'm doing this without getting paid, because I believe in it that much. All the money from that goes directly to the Georgia Tech NIL. They don't make a dime off of it. So definitely go check them out. And you guys have a good one. We'll talk to you later.